Hey everyone, we're in a new session for adding more functionality to our tool. Right now we have one music player and we're blending the different layers as audio sources right here. Before we can do cross blending between multiple music players, we actually need to add stop functionality. So what I want to be able to do is tell the music player to stop and then fade out on its own, fade out all the layers and then disable it or tell the audio source to stop so that we're not calculating it in the background. To me, it makes sense that we add that functionality before we add another music player, because what we really want to do is we want two music players that we can cross blend between. When we play a new song, we want to tell the current music player to stop and then it'll fade out. At the same time, we tell a different music player to play. So we want like one, it's sort of, my camera is reversing my hands. We want one to stop as the other one's fading up, right? Like a cross blend. But we do want to put in the functionality for that stop command, which is what we're going to do in this video. So let's do that. Let's go into our music player. And this is actually going to be really similar. Like if you think about what stop is doing, we're essentially fading the volume to 0 on all layers on a music player. So we're already kind of doing that. The big difference is when it's done, we want to tell the audio source to stop because we don't want that music player to continue playing. Like even if all the layers are 0, we want to tell it to stop. There are some optimization reasons for this, but essentially we want it to be deactive if it doesn't need to be active, essentially. So we'll protect ourselves, but also I want to show you another cool thing you can do with coroutines, which will play into that. So first of all, let's put in our stop public method. So we have our play right here. If we tell a music player to stop, we don't really care what its music event is. We just want to say, hey, music player, stop. But we do want to define a fade time. I think that makes sense. So let's add a new method called public void stop. And then we'll give it our fade time. So that will be float fade time. And at this point, we can use our play method as a reference. You know, I don't think we need this debug.log anymore, so we'll take that out. We'll keep this error checking. We actually do want to call a fade volume, right? Like in order to stop, we want to fade everything down to 0. But if you think about what you really want to do is we want to fade everything down to 0. And then once that's done, we want to disable the audio source. And anytime I want to wait until something else has finished before I do something, we have a few different options for that. We could use a like an event call, like say when finished, invoke an event, and we could do it that way. But I'm just going to show you that you could do this with coroutines as well. We're going to create a separate coroutine called the StopMusic routine, which we can use to wait until our fade volume's done and then disable all the audio sources and just keep it there. And because I may want my stop routine to be very specific and I'm going to add more things to it, like cleanup, if I want to take out audio sources and, you know, undo some audio sources to default, I could do that here, but I just want to set myself up to do that. So in the same way that we have our fade volume routine, I'm going to add a coroutine. We'll call this stop routine. Give it a default. This doesn't really matter. So right here, when we're writing our stop, we could do the same thing we've been doing, like say, if it's already there, then, you know, stop it and restart it. But we're not even sure if we want to allow multiple stop routines for a music player. We may not want to allow multiple stop calls until this one's finished. So because we're tracking this inside of a coroutine, we can actually have control over that. So we could actually say if stop routine is active, right? Like it's not null, then we can return if we want. Like we don't want that to be the case. Otherwise, start a new one. So we'll say start coroutine. And if we need to fix this later, we can. This is where we decide what we want our design intent to be. Like, do we want to allow multiple stop calls or not? You know, you could, I think it would be fine Like it would just, in the end, just restart and fade down to 0, but it would never disable until it happens. Honestly, I'm just going to say at this point, like, let's decide that later. Let's say if stop routine is null, we'll allow you to call multiple stop routines. We'll just reset it. But then once we've done the full duration, then we'll actually disable it. We'll be consistent with our fade volume at least. So we can change that later if we want. So stop coroutine. I'm just trying to describe to you like my thought process when I'm going through this, but feel free to deviate if you want. But this is kind of an ongoing thing. We'll change it later if we have to. Otherwise, stop routine is equal to start a new one. We have not made this yet, but we'll call this kind of confusing. But stop routine will pass along this start or stop routine. There we go. That's a good way to say it, I guess. And this is giving you an error because we have not written this yet. So this is an IEnumerator. Stop routine. Pass in our float fade time right here. The reason we still have an error is because we have not yield returned anything. So very similar to before, we need to fade out the music event depending on the layer that it has. So we would check if, for example, music event dot layer type is equal to additive layer type dot additive. Remember, enums are a little weird. Else if music event dot layer type is equal to layer type dot single. If we ended up having a lot more layer types, we could put this in a switch statement, for example, and make that a little cleaner. If we had more than 3, we might want to consider if this should be a separate class instead of an enum. Then each class individually could handle its own blend routine or whatever. We're only going to refactor when we need it. So remember, as part of our stop routine, we want to call a fade volume. So it's kind of weird. We're starting a coroutine inside of our enumerator right here. Overall, we're looking to blend the volume. Sometimes I like to type things out in comment code and then delete the comments later. Blend the volume to 0, depending on layer on blend type. Then we want to wait for blend to finish, stop all audio sources. And this is also an excuse to show you how you can wait for a thing to, like you can wait for a coroutine to finish before you can do something else. It's actually really cool. That's a really cool tool to use. So if it's additive, our fade volume routine, which remember, you can only have one at a time, we'll reassign it. Our fade volume routine is equal to start coroutine. What do we call this? Lerp additive. Target volume is going to be 0, right? Because we're looking to fade them all down. And our fade time is going to be our fade time. Similar from below, fade volume routine, start coroutine, lerp source single, 0 fade time. Alrighty, okay, so we've started a fade routine, so it should be fading down to 0. Now what we can do here is to wait for blend to finish before we disable the audio sources, right? We don't want to disable them early, we want to wait until this thing is done. So the cool thing about this is we could actually say yield return fade volume routine. And what this will do is this will wait until this is done. So we've completed this entire routine, like this entire thing. We can wait until that's done before we do the next thing. So this entire sequence will wait for this entire blend routine. Once that is done, because we don't really care at this point because they're all 0, what order we go in, we could go in order if we want, but just to remind you of our different types of loops, say for each audio source, and layer sources. Because they should all be at 0, we'll just go ahead and stop them because we just want to stop the music entirely. Source.stop. And stop is a method that we call from any audio source. And so we're just going through the all the audio sources that are each assigned to a layer and just telling them all to stop. We probably actually want to cancel our current fade volume if we do a stop function. So we could do that here too. Before we start this, let's say if fade volume routine is not equal null. Like if we call a stop and we intend to fade, we just want to cancel any current fade and start a new one down to 0. This is that same pattern we've been using where we say if it's not equal null, then stop coroutine. Fade volume. And then we can start a new one right here. So hopefully this makes sense. Canceled current running volume fades. Okay, and then determine which one we want to do. You know, we could write a plain one that just fades them all evenly if we want. We're not there yet, but we could do that. Stop any current ones, fade a new one, yield return, wait for this volume to finish, and then go through each source and stop. So we have our stop method working inside of the music player, but we actually want to be able to call that through the music manager because the music manager is going to tell the music player to stop whenever something else communicates with the music manager. So we need to go to our music manager and we need to add a public void and call this stop music. So we want to say stop music. In this case, we want to keep track of the current, let's say, we only have one music player for now. We'll deal with multiple music players later, but we have our music player. We'll just say stop music, very simply, MusicPlayer.stop. And we probably want to give it a fade time too, right? So let's receive a fade time. We want the designer to say stop over this amount of time, right? So they can call that stop music fade time. We'll pass that through, kind of wrapping this in. We're still not doing any checking here. So one thing we could do right here is even in our play, we could say if event is equal to null, don't play it, right? Sometimes with these, I believe they're called guard clauses or something. Sometimes I like to do one-liners if they're just check for these conditions and return. If not, if I want to leave a warning or a error message, you can do that with little brackets, but I like to keep this out of the way and up top. Okay, so if our music event that we're passing in is not null, then return, play it, just a little, probably save ourselves a little bug there. Stop music, just current player, stop, and remember if I press F12, that will take us in. We'll start a new coroutine, we'll stop over this amount of time. Inside of here, we'll cancel any current running volume fades. We will, no matter what kind of fade we're doing, we'll, or what layer type blending we're doing, we'll fade it down to 0. We'll wait until it's done. We'll tell it to stop. All right. Finally, let's actually call the stop method inside of our sound tester. So let's put that on spacebar. One more. If input.getKeyDown, keycode.space. If at some point they deprecate the style of input, you can do that with the new input system too. Just takes longer to set up, and I didn't want to do that as part of the tutorial. MusicManager manager.instance.stop. Nope. Be careful of auto complete there. Stop, and then what do we want to do? Let's do stop over 1. This is actually called stop music. Save it. I think that's it. Let's test it out. Press play. Start playing a song. We'll play song 3 with the E key. Right, and we can even test our active layer blending up. So press left key. Okay. Pause it here. When I unpause it, I'm going to press spacebar to call the stop function, which will fade down all the layers. So let's test that out. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like our stop method is working on our music player, which is pretty cool. So what that will allow us to do is to stop an entire music player. And then if we had multiple music players, we could stop one, it'll handle itself, and then we could press play on another. and that will allow us to do some eventual cross blending, which we'll do in a future video. But for now, we have our stop functionality working. We've probably handled a few bugs, and we're ready to continue working on it. So I will see you next time.